Pyruvic acid, which is the end product of glycolysis, they get converted into lactic acid, and I told you it is because of this lactic acid that is why we experience muscle cramp. Why is it called the tricarboxylic acid cycle? It is a tricarboxylic acid cycle because the first compound that is formed in this particular cycle is a 3-carbon compound, right? Hello everyone, a warm welcome to another session on chapter 14, that is respiration in plants. I am Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous session of this chapter, we had discussed about respiration and we had a question in our mind, do actually plants breathe? And we had understood plants, they do breathe, wherein they take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide, whereas in photosynthesis we had studied, that is they make use of carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and they give out oxygen. But since all parts of the plant cells cannot produce or cannot photosynthesize due to the lack of chlorophyll pigment, those sections of the plant cell, they actually undergo respiration. And therefore, we understood plants actually breathe. And we also studied about how the food that is being produced, be it in the plant or food taken in by the human beings, wherein the glucose will be converted into pyruvic acid, that is 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, which is an aerobic as well as an anaerobic process, wherein oxidation will occur. The glucose gets split into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, or they get partially oxidized into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid in a 10-step process called as glycolysis, which is also called as the EMP pathway. And we came to know that during glycolysis, energy is being utilized in the form of ATPs and also energy is being formed in the form of ATPs during the end of the glycolysis cycle. And that pyruvic acid, it can enter into an anaerobic process or into an aerobic process depending on the unavailability and the availability of the oxygen respectively. So in today's session, we shall concentrate on how exactly the pyruvic acid, what is the fate of the pyruvic acid once it is formed during glycolysis, what happens to it if in the presence of oxygen and what happens to it in the absence of oxygen, we shall see. And also we shall study, that is pyruvic acid enters into the Krebs cycle and what happens exactly to the pyruvic acid in the Krebs cycle we shall understand, and Krebs cycle is an aerobic respiration process. So to begin with today's session, we shall start with talking about fermentation. So we all know about fermentation, right? Who doesn't know about alcoholic fermentation, wherein we can prepare alcohol by a process of fermentation. For example, you just take few grapes and you put it in a closed container and you put little amount of yeast and you cover the container tightly so that aeration will not take place, and therefore in the absence of oxygen, that particular yeast cells, they convert the fruit pulp, that is the grape pulp, into alcohol, right, under anaerobic circumstances, that is in the absence of oxygen, they convert it into a alcohol. That process is nothing but fermentation. And also apart from that, when we talk about human beings, so humans, we do a lot of activities daily, right? So during exercises and all that, we are not able to breathe in such a faster rate when compared to doing other normal activities. So during exercise, because of too much of exercise or too much of activity, what happens during that time, enough of oxygen is not got to the different organs of the body. So especially during that time, what happens here is the pyruvic acid gets converted into lactic acid. So we all knew that glucose should be converted into pyruvic acid and therefore release of energy will be taking place, and that energy will be utilized during, that is to perform various physical activities. And if glucose has to be converted into pyruvic acid, then partial oxidation will take place, that is oxygen molecules get involved. So what might happen if oxygen molecules, availability of oxygen molecule is very, very less during doing exercises, aerobic exercises, or exercises in the gym, working out in the gym, or doing any physical activities such as running or any sport activities and all that. During that time, enough of oxygen will not enter into our body, and during that time the pyruvic acid gets converted into lactic acid, and that is because of the conversion of pyruvic acid into lactic acid, we sometimes experience muscle cramps and all that during any strenuous activity or any sports activity. We experience muscle cramps. It is because of the conversion of pyruvic acid to lactic acid in the absence of oxygen. So that is about fermentation we were talking about. So we shall see exactly what happens during the process of fermentation. So here first what happens before the process of fermentation, the glucose molecules should get converted into pyruvic acid. So here some of the steps they have left out, but we have already studied each of these steps in the previous session of glycolysis, wherein we came to know glucose gets split into pyruvic acid by undergoing 10 different steps, right? So here at the end what we have got pyruvic acid. Now this pyruvic acid in the absence of oxygen, why? Because fermentation is an anaerobic process. Here oxygen is not involved. So in the absence of oxygen, this pyruvic acid can get converted into ethanol, because if microbes are participating in that particular process, or that plant part, if it is there, that will get converted into ethanol or alcoholic form with the release of carbon dioxide. So with the release of carbon dioxide, ethanol is being formed, and also during this process NADH plus will get converted into NAD plus. Energy is being utilized here. And again, if it is in the case of human beings, what happens? Because of the lack of oxygen, pyruvic acid, that is during any activity if you are performing, like very tiring activity if you are performing, at that time pyruvic acid, which is the end product of glycolysis, they get converted into lactic acid. And I told you it is because of this lactic acid, that is why we experience muscle cramps, because of this lactic acid. And during this process also NADH plus molecules get converted into NAD plus, or energy is being utilized here. So this was about fermentation. So now if it is an aerobic process, so if oxygen is available, what will happen to this pyruvic acid, which was the end product of glycolysis? What happens? It will enter here aerobic respiration. If it is involved, it will enter into Krebs cycle. So first we shall understand this aerobic respiration, and then we shall study about the Krebs cycle. So aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration usually takes place in the mitochondria. We learnt in the previous chapter, previous session, that is glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm. So once in the glycolysis, there partial oxidation is taking place. It is both aerobic as well as anaerobic sometimes. So here during that process what happens? The pyruvic acid that is produced in the cytoplasm will enter into the mitochondria, because it has to enter into an aerobic phase, right? So it enters into the mitochondria because aerobic respiration process occurs inside the mitochondria. So here for aerobic respiration to take place within the mitochondria, the final product of glycolysis. So what is the final product of glycolysis? It is pyruvate, right? So pyruvate or pyruvic acid should be transported from the cytoplasm. It is transported from the cytoplasm into the mitochondria. So don't get confused. Glycolysis is occurring in the cytoplasm of the cell. So in glycolysis took place in the cytoplasm of the cell, all the 10-step process got over and glucose got split into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Now that 2 molecules of pyruvic acid should enter into a phase wherein oxygen is being involved. That is, it should enter into an aerobic respiration phase. So if it has to enter into the aerobic respiration phase, aerobic respiration, it needs oxygen. If pyruvic acid has to further continue its biochemical biochemical pathway, then it should require oxygen. Therefore, it has to enter into the mitochondria. Hence, it enters from the cytoplasm into the mitochondria of the cell. And the aerobic respiration, there are important steps that actually takes place in the aerobic respiration. The first step is, now the pyruvic acid or the pyruvate has entered from the cytoplasm into the mitochondria. Once it is in the mitochondria, the complete oxidation of pyruvate will take place. Glycolysis was a partial oxidation process, right? So by partial oxidation, pyruvate got formed. So for complete oxidation, it will require lots of oxygen molecules. For that, from the cytoplasm, it will enter into the mitochondria, and in the mitochondria, what will happen? Complete oxidation of the pyruvate will take place in a stepwise process, and during this process, the hydrogen atoms will be released. So hydrogen atoms, where were the hydrogen atoms present? They were present in the NADPH H plus, right? So from that, hydrogen atoms are made up of one proton plus a oxygen molecule. We know about it. So, or a hydrogen and an oxygen molecule, or a H plus and an oxygen molecule. So hydrogen atoms should be released, therefore leaving 3 molecules of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide will also get released here. When from water, hydrogen molecules will be released, oxygen will be utilized, and carbon dioxide molecules, that is 3 molecules of carbon dioxide, will also get released during this particular aerobic process. That is when complete oxidation of pyruvate takes place. So complete oxidation means oxygen is made use by the pyruvate, wherein it will release the protons, that is hydrogen atoms, and it will release the carbon dioxide. And during this process, electrons are also involved. So in this process of aerobic respiration, the movement of the electrons or the passing of the electrons will be removed as part of the hydrogen atoms. So the passing on of the electrons removed as part of the hydrogen atoms to molecular oxygen with simultaneous synthesis of ATP. So here electron transport also occurs, and the hydrogen atoms will also be released, and oxygen will be made use of. During that process, electrons are involved in that, and for this particular process, during this particular process, large amount of ATPs or adenine triphosphates or adenosine triphosphates are also being involved. So that is how energy is being formed in this particular process of aerobic respiration as well, wherein oxygen is being utilized. Here what happened? Glucose got converted into pyruvic acid. That pyruvic acid enters into the mitochondria. In the mitochondria, they make use of the oxygen. During that process, whatever hydrogen molecules are there, they will be given out, and carbon dioxide also will be given out, and also lot of energy will be produced in the form of ATP. That is, continuous synthesis of ATP will also occur, because what is the main aim here? To give out energy, because energy is needed for all the activities to occur properly in a plant or an animal cell, right? So that actually happens during the aerobic process here. So next, talking about the aerobic respiration again. So here we have to keep in mind one interesting factor, that is the first process takes place in the matrix of mitochondria. So in the matrix of mitochondria, the aerobic respiration will occur, and while the second process is located in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So it happens in the inner membrane of the mitochondria because electron transport is also involved in this particular case. So here what happens here is pyruvate dehydrogenase. So why is it pyruvate dehydrogenase? Here oxygen is being utilized, hydrogen molecules are being given out, and this process actually takes place with the help of an enzyme called as pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme. So pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme combines with the coenzyme A, and also I told you NADs are made use of here, and it also combines with NAD plus in the presence of magnesium ions, and in the presence of pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme, they get converted into. So here we now know that the second part of the aerobic respiration will occur in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So here what happens here is the pyruvic acid. Sorry, this is pyruvic acid. Write it down as pyruvic acid. So pyruvic acid, from where did we get pyruvic acid? I'm repeating this because you should not forget what is exactly happening here. So pyruvic acid was formed during glycolysis. That pyruvic acid actually, it enters into the mitochondria. From the cytoplasm where it was formed, it enters into the mitochondria. And there in the mitochondria, the first part of this particular aerobic respiration process, wherein what is happening? The oxygen is being utilized and the water, that is hydrogen, is being given out, and during that process NAD plus is also being utilized. So during this process, the second process will actually occur in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So here what happens? Pyruvic acid, so this is pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid combines with the coenzyme A, that is coenzyme A. Along with that, it makes use of NAD plus, and in the presence of magnesium ions and an enzyme. So enzymes always catalyzes the rate of a reaction. That is why it makes use of an enzyme, Pyruvate Dehydrogenase, wherein it forms acetyl-CoA. So the end product of aerobic respiration here is pyruvic acid gets converted into acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA, wherein it gives out carbon dioxide, NADH, and hydrogen molecules are being released, or protons are being released, or hydrogen ions are being released. Now it is understood. It just looks like a simple single step, but this is actually a cycle which is a continuous process, because oxidation is occurring there, carbon dioxide is being released out. It is a continuous process wherein acetyl-CoA will be formed, and it is called as the Krebs cycle. So we shall study. So the acetyl-CoA that is formed then enters into a cyclic pathway wherein the tricarboxylic acid, it is called as the tricarboxylic acid or the TCA cycle. So carboxylic acid, it is also called as the tricarboxylic acid. So the acetyl-CoA that was formed, it enters into a cyclic pathway which is called as the tricarboxylic acid cycle, and it is also called as the Krebs cycle. So Krebs cycle, why is it called the Krebs cycle? Is because here this particular pathway was found out by a scientist called as Hans Krebs. So this is a scientist, Hans Krebs. He was the one who discovered this particular pathway, and hence this particular pathway is also called as the Krebs cycle. So now we shall see what exactly happens in the Krebs cycle. So Krebs cycle involves the use of oxygen. It makes use of the oxygen, and therefore it is an aerobic process. So we shall see what happens in the tricarboxylic acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. So in tricarboxylic acid cycle, the pyruvate that was formed, so a 6-carbon compound that was glucose got lysed or splits into 2 molecules of 3-carbon compound, that is pyruvic acid. Where did it occur? It occurred in the cytoplasm of the cell. Now that 3-carbon pyruvic acid, that is 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid, enters into the mitochondria. Once it enters into the mitochondria, it passes into the aerobic respiration phase. So what happens? So here the pyruvic acid. So this cycle takes place twice. Why? Because 2 molecules of pyruvic acids are there. It will take place twice. So here what happens? Glucose is split into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, right? So one pyruvic acid molecule or one pyruvate compound will finish one Krebs cycle, and again one more pyruvate compound that is remaining will again undergo one Krebs cycle. So therefore 2 cyclic reactions will, or 2 cyclic pathways will occur here. So one pyruvate compound that is there, which is a 3-carbon compound, it actually, what happens in the mitochondria, that is the inner membrane of the mitochondria, or in the membrane of the mitochondria, what happens? Here NAD plus gets converted into NAD, or NAD plus is being made use of, and that NAD releases the hydrogen. Hydrogen is being released from it. So, in this particular process, a coenzyme A will actually help in this particular process. So, pyruvate combines with coenzyme A and combines with NAD plus, wherein it forms acetyl coenzyme A, which is a 2-carbon molecule. And why it is a 2-carbon molecule? Here, 1 carbon molecule is lost in the form of carbon dioxide. Therefore, it becomes a 2-carbon molecule here. So, therefore, during this particular process, hydrogen ions are also being released. So, here what is happening? Protons are being released, or hydrogen ions are being released, or hydrogen is being released, and also a molecule of carbon dioxide is being released. Therefore, the pyruvate gets converted into acetyl coenzyme A in the presence of a coenzyme A. That is, it combines with coenzyme A to form acetyl coenzyme A, which is a 2-carbon compound. Why is it a 2-carbon compound? 1 carbon molecule got eliminated in the form of carbon dioxide. So, that is why. Now, this acetyl coenzyme A enters into a tricarboxylic acid cycle. Why is it called a tricarboxylic acid cycle? It is a tricarboxylic acid cycle because the first compound that is formed in this particular cycle is a 3-carbon compound, right? So, 3-carbon compound is involved here. So, here next acetyl coenzyme A gets converted into citric acid. So, here acetyl coenzyme A, which is a 2-carbon compound, combines with oxaloacetic acid, which is a 4-carbon compound, in the presence of a citrate synthase. So, in the presence of a citrate synthase enzyme to form 6-carbon compound of citric acid. How did it form a 6-carbon compound? Here, 2-carbon compound of acetyl coenzyme A combined with 4-carbon compound of oxaloacetic acid. 4 plus 2, it will form a 6-carbon compound, which is a citric acid, and it was favored by the enzyme citrate synthase. And this citric acid again forms a 5-carbon compound, which is called as alpha. This is alpha ketoglutaric acid. So, how did it form a 5-carbon compound? During the formation of 5-carbon compound, 1 carbon molecule was lost in the form of carbon dioxide. So, 1 molecule of carbon dioxide got lost. So, therefore, 6 carbon became a 5 carbon. So, what is that 5-carbon compound that it formed? It was a alpha ketoglutaric acid. And during this process also, again, hydrogen is being lost, or a proton is being lost. Hydrogen is being lost. And again, this alpha ketoglutaric acid, which is a 5-carbon compound, gets formed into a 4-carbon compound, which is a succinic acid. So, succinic acid is a 4-carbon compound. Why did it get converted into a 4-carbon compound? Again, here carbon is lost in the form of carbon dioxide. So, that is why. And here again, protons or hydrogen ions are also being lost, or it is being formed. So, here it is during this process, that is, guanosine diphosphate gets converted into a guanosine triphosphate. That is, addition of a phosphate group will occur here. And this succinic acid, which is a 4-carbon compound, gets converted into malic acid. During this process, the loss of carbon atom will not take place. Carbon dioxide release will not take place. Therefore, it will remain as a 4-carbon compound, that is malic acid, wherein FADs will get converted into FADH2. Here, they get converted into FADH2. This 4-carbon malic acid gets converted into oxaloacetic acid, and again the cycle will continue. During this process, again NADH is formed and H plus is being released. So, therefore, what did we understand here? Mainly energy is being formed in this tricarboxylic acid cycle, wherein the energy is in the form of NADH and protons, and H plus is being released. It helps in the decarboxylation, that is removal of the carbon dioxide molecule. So, every step, if you can see, almost carbon dioxide molecules got eliminated, right? They got eliminated because for the use of energy, what will happen? Glucose will combine with oxygen to release energy and also carbon dioxide and also H plus ions. That is what is happening in this particular tricarboxylic acid cycle. So this is a aerobic respiration process. So here what happened? Pyruvic acid, it made use of 4 NAD plus, right? How many NAD plus can we count? 1, here 1 NAD plus, then it made use of the second one, then here third one, and here fourth one. So therefore, it makes use of 4 NAD plus molecules. Pyruvic acid makes use of 4 NAD plus molecules. It makes use of 1 FAD plus molecules. That is for one cycle. If it was for 2 cycle, it will make use of 8. 4 twos are 8, because here actually during glycolysis 2 pyruvic acids or pyruvates were formed. One pyruvate got converted into oxaloacetic acid and the cycle is continuing here. We have seen. Again, this cycle will repeat twice. Why twice? Because one more pyruvic acid molecule is remaining or pyruvate is remaining, right? So for one cycle, the pyruvic acid will make use of 4 NAD plus 1 FAD plus. If you can see, it is 1 FAD plus here, 1 FAD or FAD plus, and will make use of 2 molecules of water. It will make use of 1 ADP, that is 1 ADP, and will make use of 1 inorganic phosphate. Why ADP and PI is used? To convert into ATP. If you can see here, we had ADP which combined with, that is the ADP which combined with the ATP to form along with the inorganic phosphate. And where does this actually take place? In the mitochondrial matrix. And during this particular process, 3 molecules of carbon dioxide is released and 4 molecules of NADH will be released, 4 molecules of hydrogen ions, FADH2 and ATPs is also being released. So this is about the Krebs cycle. So at the end, Krebs cycle, what all is formed in the Krebs cycle, we shall see. So here it was 4 molecules. So if it was 2, it will be totally at the end of the Krebs cycle, how much, what all is being utilized? Pyruvic acid will release or it will give out 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. It will give out 8 molecules of NADH and it will give out again 8 molecules of H plus and it will give out 2 molecules of FADH2 and it will give out 2 molecules of ATP, or we can consider it as GTP. Either ATP or GTP we can consider it. So much is being released at the end of once 2 cycles of Krebs cycle is being finished. So why 2 cycles? I have told you, because 2 molecules of pyruvic acids are there. So that will be finished. So how much it will utilize? It will utilize 8 molecules of NAD plus and it will utilize 1 molecule, that is 2 molecules of FAD. So FAD plus, it will utilize 4 molecules of water and either 2 molecules of ATPs or GTPs, 2 molecules of GDPs. So much it will utilize. So much it will make use of and it will give all these outside. So that is how energy is being released in the form of NADH and also in the form of ATPs and FADH2. So final product that we got is energy is being released. So and this energy will be utilized for all the cellular activities to take place, and therefore it is a cellular respiration because the use of oxygen is made use and carbon dioxide is given out and energy is being created inside the cells, right? Inside the mitochondria, inside the cells. That is why it is a cellular respiration. That is, we are talking about the cellular respiration in the case of plants and the animal cells here. Especially in this case, we are talking about the plant cells, because I told you all the plant parts or plant cells cannot photosynthesize. That is when they undergo this respiration process. So plants do respire for their normal biochemical activities to occur. So this was about the tricarboxylic acid cycle, which is also called as the Krebs cycle. So I hope you understood this session well, wherein we studied about the process. That is, in the previous session we had studied how pyruvic acid was formed by glycolysis, and in this particular session we understood If pyruvic acid enters into an anaerobic phase, what will it form? It either gets converted into ethanol, that is a process called as fermentation, or in the case of animals, it will form lactic acid. We understood. And if it enters into an aerobic phase, wherein oxygen will be completely utilized and it will enter into the Krebs cycle phase, wherein it will get converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and it will enter into a Krebs cycle phase wherein lots of energy is being released, which can be utilized for the normal daily activities to be done either in the case of a plant or any other animal. So this is about the that is tricarboxylic acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, which is a part of the aerobic respiration pathway. So I hope you understood this session well. We shall meet again in the coming session, wherein we shall study about the electron transport process and the oxidative phosphorylation process. Thank you.